today's seminar on leading your HR department into the future. My name is Richard Bevan. I'm Head of Business Development for SpanishPoint, and your presenters today are Gonzalo Marcos, who's the Technical Evangelist at Nintex, and John Corley, the CTO at SpanishPoint. Today's agenda, initially Gonzalo is going to run through Nintex as a workflow platform and introducing you to HR processes, and then John's going to do a demonstration of automating one business process, which is going to be a HR leave request process. After the demo, we'll have a chance to have a Q&A. There is a questions panel that you can enter any questions as you're going along, and we'll address those towards the end. Before we start, quick introduction to SpanishPoint. So Microsoft have a digital transformation framework which encompasses engaging your customers, empowering your employees, and optimizing your operations. And SpanishPoint has solutions and provides solutions in each of these areas. So within Engage Your Customers, we have a Dynamics 365 solution. Within Optimizing Your Operations, we do a lot of application modernization for customers. And within Empower Your Employees, we provide SharePoint and Office 365 solutions. Today we're going to be focusing on the Nintex solution, which cuts across empowering your employees and optimizing your operations. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Gonzalo, who will just run you through the introduction to HR processes.
Thank you very much for the intro, Richard, and good morning all. So, yeah, we're going to make it a little bit different in this webinar, and rather than talking only about technology, workflows, SharePoint, today we are going to talk about solutions, and in particular solutions for the HR departments. I think I have the... Richard, can you give me the control? There you go. There you go. So yeah, I was saying today we're going to talk about solutions rather than talking about the product itself. And if you are in the HR space, or even if you are in the call and are in the IT space, I'm sure you will appreciate this phrase that managing your human capital takes an elaborate set of processes and procedures. And that's absolutely true. Working in HR means dealing with a lot of processes. It's paper-driven, there's a lot of checks, a lot of governance, a lot of compliance involved on those activities. And these activities can lead to bottlenecks and points where people and data are disconnected to each other. Let me just tell you a couple of facts that apply to this topic, to these problems. 50% of the 50% of the HR department's time is spent processing employee information. And it might be tasks that have to be completed and can be automated. It might be entering employee information into the systems. It also might be information that has to be duplicated to have this employee information in the different systems in the organizations, not only in SharePoint. And on the other hand, 40% of the time is spent on admin work, whether it is filling pieces of paper, or it might be signing off documents, reviewing documents, approving contracts. All of these tasks very often is redundant and manual work that can introduce a significant increase and overhead in time. A lot of the time in an HR department is spent entering data. You can even find situations in which you have two different applications that are basically handling the same piece of employee information from one system to another, or in other tasks. So why should we improve these HR processes? There are very clear examples of what we can save introducing these efficiencies. The obvious improvement is saving time and resources, obviously. But improving HR processes, automating them, means that we will reduce the admin work, so we will become more efficient doing the same task in less time, but also will save resources and administrative costs. If we focus on HR processes, we know that processes like employee onboarding or employee reviews are extremely paper intensive. We've got contracts, applications, CVs, interview sheets, performance review documents, and an organization can easily struggle to coordinate and organize all of these documents. Manual provisioning and provisioning, don't forget that they waste a lot of time. I don't know the people in the call if they have an IT provider to create and provision new user accounts, but in my experience, going through the process of creating accounts for only one user in all the systems in the organization, such as Active Directory, Exchange, CRM, Skype for Business, granting permissions, it would take minimum of 2-3 hours worth of work, regardless the size of the organization. And when we look at the cost per hour of an IT provider, well, I don't have the numbers in Ireland, but in the UK it could be around £200 minimum per hour, which means 400, 500 pounds for every new user in the company. So obviously I want to have a process to automate all these activities, and I want to have a piece of software that allows me to save that money, and that's the kind of process that Nintex is very good at automating. Speaking to all the different systems in the company, SharePoint, CRM, Salesforce, Dropbox, you name them. And when we talk about the provisioning, that's also very important. We need to provide a way to HR or the department or manager to automatically remove all permissions and access to all these systems. And it has to be quick and safe, in order not to run the risk of having a malicious person deleting sensitive information or even blocking data. Also talking about the provision, having control of the software licenses is very important. Having under control of these licenses, avoiding to use unnecessary licenses for new software is also a way to reduce costs. And having in place and automating all these processes will give the impression to the employee that everything is under control, and will encourage them to use the right systems at the time. That's part of the employee satisfaction. That creates a true digital workplace for the employee, and avoid constantly calling IT support to trade or request access to systems or asking for help when they cannot find the right piece of paper. Don't forget about compliance, because at the end of the day in HR we are managing very sensitive, personal and confidential information that we need to make sure is only seen by the right people. Automating these processes will give us a way to mitigate the risk of losing this information, and also to make sure that the way we are processing this information is in compliance with the legislation in every country. Remember that for those organizations that work globally with offices in different countries, regulations depend on the country we are hiring a new employee. So it might mean that the checks and rules we need to be in compliance can be different from one country to the other. And last but not least, when we need to introduce employee information in different systems in our organization, we run the risk of misspelling or getting wrong data for a system if we do it manually. Automating this flow of data, let's call it this way, across the different systems in the organization, we will guarantee that the data accuracy of the whole process. So let's drill down to some of these processes in HR and see how Nintex can help. When we are talking about recruiting processes, there are multiple touch points and multiple streams of the whole process. This is just an example, but in general the recruiting process can be broken down into 3 different stages, where we will be involving HR, but also more departments in the organization, such as financial, operations, marketing, IT, or the specific department to which the employee will work for. We can have the initial stage of job advertisement, where we will be collecting the description of the role from the manager, the requirements of the job from the legal and HR departments, and when the job description is ready to be promoted, Then we can involve marketing to promote and publish the advertisements in our website, social media, etc. Then we need to look after the interview process, in which we will be collecting CVs, scheduling interviews, collecting feedback from the interviews, and putting all this information together in the best possible way so that the business decision maker can take easily the decision of hiring or not hiring this new employee. And moving forward, we start the process of hiring that person with a lot of paperwork involved. The offer letter, the contract, the salaries, everything will be probably signed off electronically using DocuSign, Adobe Sign, or any e-signature provider. And we will need to notify the IT department that we will have a new user on a specific date to start all the user provisioning process. Now, let's have a look at the following process. Once the recruiting process has finished, right afterwards, we need to kick off the onboarding process of that new employee in the organization. And as you can see, this onboarding process has as well different streams. First, we need to collect all the employee information, in general via different data forms. That's the information we will need to contact IT and have all the software and hardware provisioning. As we mentioned before, with the employee information, we will need to create the Active Directory account, grant the permissions, provisioning the licenses for the HR system, Dynamic CRM, SAP. We need to provide a mailbox, a Jammer account, Skype for Business. But also we will need to provision all the hardware. We will need to check, depending on the role of the new employee, if he or she needs a laptop, a different kind of laptop, or even if they need a cell phone. And last but not least, before the new employee starts, we will schedule all the initial meetings with HR and the different departments or teams in the organization during the first stage. We also need to make sure that the new employee has the handbook, the user guides, and all the documentation to look at during the first week or weeks. The onboarding process finishes there for the first week or weeks, but for the first months we need to schedule and put in place some periodic performance reviews. And in this case, Nintex Workflow and Forms can help us to automatically schedule all these meetings, to send reminders, to collect the feedback, generate the corresponding documents, prepare them to be electronically signed, and maintain all the records of this last process. Not only in SharePoint or Office 365, but also in the HR system or any system that we might be using to track all these activities. And all of this obviously is in a timely manner. We need to remove the human component that can lead us to break the flow of the process. Automating these reminders, using delegation and escalation for the task, that's part of the features of an Nintex workflow we can use to make sure everything happens in the right way, even if there is still some human interaction. Don't forget that we want to automate and minimize the human interaction in order to save time and in order to avoid mistakes. But also we want to keep track of everything that's going on. We want to have a piece of software that follows the process, that records every decision, and that makes sure that takes all the required information to be in compliance with our internal and external policies. And finally, the last example is the lead request, the lead request process. Let me check if I can. The next one, yeah. The lead request process probably is the most famous example in the history of Nintex. Probably because most and almost all of our clients have found it is easy to implement with the Nintex technology. Even though it might seem so easy to build a lead request solution with Nintex, as John will show us in his demo, it's very important to audit and control these requests. Nintex can help us to automate and improve the lead requests from the process side of things, but also can help us in the way the request can be initiated. Joe will show us in his demo how we can easily customize a form to fill in with the necessary data of the lead request, but this is something that we can also use on the go with our mobile phone or our tablet using the Nintex mobile app. It can be very helpful when we need to upload, I don't know, a doctor's letter or any additional document to my lead request. And it can be easily done taking a photo of the document with the camera of my cell phone or my mobile device and adding that as an attachment of my lead request item rather than taking a hard copy of the letter, scan it, send it to my mailbox, print it in the office and leave the document onto my manager's desk. We can also add some integration to my HR system to this process using web services calls so that I can automatically check the leave balance of a particular user when the person is requesting annual leave, collect that balance and send both the number of days requested and the number of remaining days in the current balance to the manager in the same task notification. This way the manager will have in one place all the information needed to take that decision to approve the leave request or not. And this is the kind of things that really speed up the process. I can tell you that one of the most recurring questions I have from my partners and managers is obviously how can I improve the performance of my workflows? And I always explain to them that in most of the cases the answer is not the technology or the resources I'm using to run this workflow. Don't forget that a workflow 99% of the time is waiting for people. And I give you an example. Creating a task in a workflow can take just a second, but approving that task can take days of waiting for that person. If we are able to provide all the necessary information to the approver, the person, the dates requested, the leave balance, then he or she, the manager, he or she can take the decision just by reading the notification in the email and answering to that email with the Nintex lazy approval, rather than reading the task notification, click on the link, go to SharePoint, have a look at the task form, have a look at all the information, go to another system to check the leave balance, and so on. So how can we improve all these processes with Nintex? Let me introduce you to the Nintex Workflow Platform. Probably most of you know the Nintex Workflow solution, the Workflow Designer, but it's not only about just designing the workflow. What we try to provide is a platform to create workflow solutions. So apart from helping you with a tool where you can easily, you will see it in the demo, you will easily create and design your workflow, we are providing all the components to fill in the gaps of creating that solution. For example, with Nintex Forms, we will automate and the process of collecting the data. Every single process will start with the interaction to the end user. And with Nintex Forms, we will be able to automate that process, customizing the SharePoint forms. Taking one step beyond, we will be able to publish workflow tasks and forms to an Nintex mobile app. And with the Nintex connectors, we will have all this layer of integration, all these layer of connectors. We will find custom actions in the Workflow Designer to integrate with all the systems that are around SharePoint. We can find connectors for CRM system, for Salesforce, for SQL databases, for DocuSign, Dropbox, OneDrive. I think there are more than 200 actions in the Workflow Designer that will help us to integrate and talk SharePoint to the rest of the systems. And finally, we also have the document generation functionality. Especially in the HR departments, at some point of the process, we will have the need to create a document or to send a document to be signed. And these documents can easily be prepared using templates, and the information of the employee or from the company can easily be collected dynamically during the same process using the drawn document generation functionality. And with that, let me hand over to John, who will show us the technology behind all of this, and will show us how we can, in one example, can create a workflow solution around one of the use cases that we were talking about. John, all yours. Change the presenter, so all yours.
Cool. Okay. Thanks very much, Gonzalo. So, yeah, my name's John Curley, and I'm going to show you, I guess, reasonably quickly how easy it is to build a workflow in Nintex. So the scenario I'm going to use is just a sample scenario, which I think we already mentioned, which is just leave request. And like the real benefit of Nintex is that you can build these workflows that suit the exact kind of processing and requirements of your organization really quickly. So we're going to try and show that by building one from scratch. So I've got in SharePoint just 2 lists created that are regular lists in SharePoint. I've got a calendar and I've got a list for leave requests. And the basic workflow that we want to implement here is that any user can go in and request leave. That leave request will go to their manager for approval, and if it's approved, it will be popped into their calendar here, so everybody can see who's available or not available on a certain day. So these are just regular SharePoint lists, just to show, you click new and you get the kind of regular, reasonably boring SharePoint forms. So I'm going to go into the list behind this, leave request list. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a form, and I'm going to build a form using the Nintex Form Designer. So really what I'm doing here is showing you how you would build the workflow and the form to automate this process. Obviously most people will experience it through using the stuff after you've built it, but this is to kind of get across the idea of how quick and easy it is to implement these processes. And I've just picked leave request as an example. There's lots of other examples, as Gonzalo has said. Like a really common one I think is employee onboarding, and that's one a lot of our customers have started to implement. So when I said create a new form in Nintex Form Designer, it automatically created a form based on the information that that was defined in the list. So I already have my fields in here. I can get rid of the Nintex logo if I want to and put in my own branding. I'm going to leave it there for the time being. And I can add in additional fields and information if I want to do that. So I'm just going to call this reason for leave. And even though Gonzalo was talking about attachments and stuff, I'm going to decide I don't really want people attaching stuff to the leave request form. I'm just going to get rid of those things and tidy those up. Just going to move this stuff around here. Just dragging and dropping my fields. Okay, so that's my basic form. One thing I might want to do is I might want to put in some rules, some validation rules in here that are used to kind of control the type of information that's entered. So I can just go add rule. There's 2 main types of rules, so I'm going to, call this check start date. I'm going to change the rule from formatting to validation. And I just, put in the condition that I'm looking for here. So, the start date can't be less than today's date, essentially. So I pick some common thing, today's date. Okay, so I've built my form. There's lots of other controls I can add here, and I can add the fields that are available on the list, and I can add common SharePoint controls such as the taxonomy items and stuff like that. So what I can also do is I can extend this form to work on multiple different devices. So if I want to create a smartphone version of this form that will work in a web browser or any smartphone, I just click on the smartphone icon here, and it automatically generates the smartphone version of the form. See the way it preserved the changes I've made, like the reason for leave and so on. So you can just check how it's going to look. Usually you don't have to make any changes, but you can rearrange things a little bit if you want. And Nintex also works through native apps on mobile device. So there's an Nintex mobile app that you can install on your mobile phone that will work in an offline manner. So I can create a version of this form that will work in that offline app as well. It just tells me that you need to kind of obey certain rules for that to work, and then this is got the Nintex mobile app version of that form. Okay, so I'm just going to save my form, and I'm going to publish it. So now, if I go back into my list, and I create a new item, you'll see I'll have changed from the standard, kind of boring enough SharePoint form to the regular kind of, the Nintex form that I created myself. And if I just put in my holidays, putting that date there. So it comes up with the error message. So I should have put in an error message in there saying, hey, this date can't be in the past. But if I just fix that to today's date. Okay. So what I've done is I've built a form here, which is great. Obviously that means the user experience is a bit better for people putting in their leave requests, and that they can put them in now on mobile devices where it works really well and is fully kind of responsive to the size of that form factor, and it works on mobile apps. But what I want to do is automate the workflow. So automate the approval of the leave request and automate the adding of the leave request directly into the calendar. So to do that, I'm going to create a workflow in Nintex. So the workflow designer essentially gives you a bunch of actions. There's over 200 actions, as Gonzalo said, available in Nintex. And it's got the really common used ones over here on the left-hand side. I'm just going to start off by just sketching out what my workflow is going to look like. So the first thing I'm really interested in doing is I'm going to, assign a workflow task to the manager of the request, asking them to approve or disapprove the workflow. Before that happens, I'm going to send a notification to the person who initiated the workflow saying, hey, your workflow has been submitted and it's with your manager for approval. And then down the approval track here on the right-hand side, what I want to do once the thing is approved is I want to add the workflow or the holiday leave request into a calendar. So I'm going to create a list item essentially. So I can quickly begin to fill out just the more meaningful names for what's going on, so people looking at the workflow will understand what's happening. So notify a submitter. get manager approval. Add to leave calendar. And that's the kind of basic outline of my workflow. You'll notice the little kind of warning signs saying, hey, these workflow actions have to be configured. I haven't said, hey, who the person is who gets the email or even what's in the email, nor have I said how the approval is going to work. So I'm going to fill in those details now really quickly by configuring those individual actions. Okay, so this is my send notification. So I'm going to send a notification to the person who initiated the workflow. So I don't have to type in their name because obviously different people could initiate it. I can use the kind of smart picker here to pick a lookup value. And there's already an item in here called initiator. So no matter who starts the workflow, they're going to get an email back saying, hey, your workflow has been submitted and is waiting approval. Then on the subject, I'm going to say here, and in here I'm going to put in one of the fields that was filled in because there's different types of kind of leave that you can request. And the different types of leave were in a field on the form that I picked called leave type. So one of the leave type is kind of annual leave or holidays. The other is the others are sick leave and so on. And then I'm going to keep the message body really simple. And you've got an option here in delivery. So individual users can configure what their preference is for receiving notifications from Nintex. I'm going to switch it on to user preference here. So it's going to pick the user's preference for notifications and it's going to use that. So I've finished doing my little notification here. Now I'm going to configure the workflow, the getting approval part itself. So within the getting the flexi task action, as it's called, where we're getting approval for stuff, and this could be any type of approval. Flexi task is one of the most common used actions in Nintex, but in this case we're going to use it to get approval for the annual leave. So I'm going to pick the approver, and I'm going to do a similar kind of thing. So, and this time I'm going to pick manager. Now manager in this case is using Active Directory, so it's using the manager of the person through Active Directory, but it can use, other, SharePoint groups. It can use lists where we look up who the manager is for certain people, so you can configure the way it calculates the manager in lots of ways in Nintex. So I'm going to allow delegation, so I'm going to allow the manager, if they're on leave or away, or if they just want somebody else to approve it instead of them, to delegate that action to somebody else. I'm going to allow lazy approval, which is a way in which people can quickly reply to workflow requests via emails and instant message. And I'm going to put in a description here, which is, so I'm going to put in the name of the requester. So the initiator's name has requested, and I pick the leave type from a start date to end date. Please approve or reject. And I've got my outcomes or approve and reject. I can change the name, add other outcomes, but in this case, that doesn't make sense. The task name itself, I'm going to change that as well. I'm going to say request approve initiator name, and then the type of leave. So leave type. Okay, so everything else in here is set okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go into the notification piece. So this will create a task and assign it to the approver, but I want to notify that approver that, you know, that they need to do that. So I'm going to go in to the notification email piece, and I can configure this stuff here. So I'm going to say delivery type again. I'm going to say pick the user's preference. The subject, I'm going to change that subject to include, just reuse the task name that I've already set up, so I don't have to retype all that stuff again. So I've got task name, so that's the thing that's going to, you know, have already the name of the person and stuff like that in there. And then I've got the body of the email itself, so I'm just going to go to the end of that, and I'm going to insert the task description that I've already entered in. The task description contains all the information from the form that the person really needs to make a decision about whether they can approve or reject a person's leave request. So I think that is everything I need to do in this. So I'm going to save that. And then, oh, I forgot one thing. So I'm also going to set some reminders in here. So if the person, the manager, doesn't approve or reject the item, I want them to get a reminder email to say, hey, you really need to do this. So I'm going to say I'm going to send up to 4 reminders, and they're going to happen every 4 hours. So I'm going to bombard the HR or the manager with stuff. I'm going to only do it during business hours though, which is the main thing. And then I'm going to just put in the subject here, approval stuff, doesn't happen itself. I'm going to put in the same information so the manager can see what they're supposed to be doing. So task information, task name, and in the description I'm going to put in the same task description. And I'm going to pick the user's preference for delivery type as well. Okay. So what I've done is I've set my kind of core action, I've set the notification of the task, I've set a reminder. I could do all sorts of other more advanced things like setting an escalation, like where if somebody hasn't replied to their task in a certain amount of time that it automatically escalates to somebody else. I could customize the form that pops up when somebody says they want to approve or disapprove by editing the task form. There's a whole host of more advanced stuff that I can do, but I'm just going to do this quickly to kind of show how easy it is to build kind of Nintex workflows. So I'm now going to configure my action to add it to the calendar. So I'm going to pick leave calendar as the list that I'm going to add this item in. So I'm going to pick the workflow context, and I'm going to pick a requester. Let me see how this display name. So I'm just mapping essentially the name of the person into the title of the calendar entry. Now I'm going to put the start date for their person's leave into the start time in the calendar entry, and I'm going to put the end date from that form that they filled in into the end date in that calendar entry, so that we've got a calendar entry that matches the leave request. Okay. So I think that's all I need to do. Super. So as I look at this now, I think, well, hey, I better tell the requester, the person who submitted the stuff, that they've been either approved or disapproved. But I'm not going to, I can just quickly copy stuff. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to pop it in here. And I'm just going to tell the submitter, hey, you've been approved. So this will be really quick. So all this other stuff is all fine, but I'm just going to be, has been approved. I'll give him a smiley face. Okay, so that's that. And then I'm going to do the same in the rejection piece, a copy, and paste, and then I'm going to edit this action. Okay, this time around it's a bit more complicated, has been rejected. And I'm going to put in the comments that the approver made so that they can see the full comments or the reason why it was rejected. This time around, I'm going to send the rejection via email just in case the comments are a big long kind of essay that you don't want to see an instant messenger about why the person didn't get leave. So that's okay. So I'm going to hit save. And now I think I've pretty much done everything I need to do with the workflow. I'm just going to change some settings on the workflow to give it a name, and then I'll be ready to publish it. So I'm just going to call it Demo Leave Request. And I'm going to start it automatically when a list item is created. I'm going to switch on this advanced logging and publish. I'm going to allow it to be started manually from the list item, and everything else is okay. So I'm just going to save, and now I'm going to publish. So this is the initial version of the workflow. We can wire this workflow up afterwards with the HR system so that we can get the balance for people's leave and stuff and update that in that system. But for the time being, I'm just going to leave it as it is. Okay, so it's been published, so I can go back to my list. Okay, so now I'm back at the place where I started, so I should be able to see that I've kind of automated a fair few things in this process. So if I click New Item, I can generate the stuff with my form. So I'm going to say John's Holidays. I'm going to say it's annual leave rather than sick days or anything like that. I'm going to go on holidays tomorrow. I'm going to come back the end of tomorrow, and that's really all I need to do. Okay, so I've submitted my leave request. I'm logged in a separate window as my manager as well. So, I'll be able to kind of follow the workflow through. So the first thing we see here is that I've got an instant message, not from a person, but from the Nintex workflow saying, hey, your leave request has been submitted. And that's because my workflow notification preferences are set to instant message if I'm in the office. If I go into the manager's view, so I'm also logged in here as this lady Jane Doe, and Jane has is able to, has her notification set to email only. And if I see, look in the email here, I got my leave request in here. So see, the subject is response required, request, approve Richard Rowe's annual leave. It's the name of the person I was logged in as, with kind of dates and so on. So I've got the dates in here from the 10th to the 10th, and I can either approve or reject. And actually, to approve this, all I have to do is just type in the email, approve, and hit send. So if I now go back to the main window where I was logged in as Richard, I should be able to see, I'm going to close that window there. Okay, so I should be able to see soon that that's got approved. One thing you can also do, so that's my annual leave has been submitted, so I'll get rid of that. One thing you can also do is you can track what the status of your workflow is. So let me just check here. So I can check what the status of my workflow is at any point in time. So if I go into, oh, here it is here. Just when I was getting worried it wasn't going to come back. So it's notified me here, your leave request has been approved with my little smiley face. And if I just refresh my view here, we should see that the calendar entry has been added into the calendar as well. So I've successfully kind of built a workflow that kind of manages reasonably complicated approval, where you've got delegation, where you've got reminders automatically happening, and where it's kind of adding stuff to a shared calendar based on different things happening. I'm just going to run the workflow one more time to just show you how at any point in time you can figure out from a governance perspective what's happening with your workflows. So I'm going to say new sick request. So this time I'm going to say, hey, I want sick leave, but I want sick leave next Friday, and I'm going to say, well, I always feel ill after rugby practice. And then I'm going to hit save. So I've sent that off to be approved, so I'm getting my little notification saying my sick leave request has been submitted. I can switch my preference to email, and that will come through as an email as well. But if I want to see, or if you as administrator of a process want to see what the status of workflows are, then it's kind of really easy to do that. You can just have a look here. You can see, hey, these are the workflows that are completed, these are the ones that are in process, and for the ones that are in process, it's possible to get a visual look at what's actually happening for that workflow. So you can see it's currently assigned to Jane Doe, and the status is pending. If I just go into here, then you can also get an interactive view of what's happening with the workflow. So if I just go list, workflow settings, manage workflows, and if I pick the workflow that I created called demo leave request, I can view the history of the workflow, so how many times it's run, so I can pick the one that's running. and then I can get a visual of exactly where that workflow is. And you can even include this little visual on the form that we did for the request, so people can go back in and see what the status of that workflow. So it's green for the part that it's gone through, it's amber at the part that it's kind of stuck at the moment, and then there's no color for the bits that it hasn't got to yet. So if I go back into the Jane Doe, who's the manager here, she should have gotten an email saying, hey, Richard is looking for sick leave. So I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to respond to this task. So I'm going to not just answer via email, this time I'm going to answer in a more elaborate way by going in and filling the form in SharePoint. So I'm rejecting this form here. You can customize, that was that edit task form option I was showing you earlier, and saying, hey, I think you should skip rugby practice, and click OK. So now if I refresh my little view of the workflow here, then I should see soon that it's gone down this rejection path, the left-hand path here. And because we set that these type of things aren't sent through Instant Messenger, I got my email here saying, hey, your leave request has been rejected, and then my comment in there saying, hey, I think you should skip rugby practice. And so we've built a very quick workflow there. So, what I can do is there's lots of other kind of things that you can have a look at here. So as the administrator of the workflow, you can look at the statistics overall. So I can look at the statistics for the demo leave request, and I can see how many times it's been run and how long each of the steps of the process took. So it's been run 2 times, it's been completed 2 times. This is the average duration and the maximum duration of that workflow. In the Get Manager Approval piece, I can get to see who all the different approvers were. There's only one in this case, and what her statistics were. So 1 approval, 1 rejection, taking an average amount of 2 minutes 34 seconds. So if you notice in your workflow or your process that certain people are taking long periods of time to answer stuff, then you're able to kind of do that. The last part I'm going to show really is just how you can extend that workflow even further. So if you have, for example, a HR system which has within it the amount of annual leave that a person has left, and you want to integrate this form with that, that's something that you can do really easily. So if I go back into my leave, I can edit my workflow and link with any kind of system that's based on SQL Server or has web service interfaces. So in this case, I'm just going to go in here quickly. Manage the workflow. This time I'm going to edit the workflow. And I've got a pre-built kind of workflow that I've created that calls a web service in the HR system and returns the balance. So you can, a really good thing about Nintex is you can create these little reusable workflows that you can kind of add into stuff. So I can grab that, for example, and pop it in here, and I can configure it, saying, hey, this is the initiator. So it's going to output a value in here, the number of hours. I'm going to pick the initiator, pick the leave type, and the HR system is going to tell me how many hours that person has left underneath that leave category. Another great thing you can do is you can save your workflow as a template. So let's say you've built an approval workflow for a process, and that is working really well, and you want that same process to be available to other teams or other sites within SharePoint, well then you can just save that workflow as a template, and then everybody who's administering those other different sites can use that template to reuse that workflow that you've built. Obviously you can kind of export these workflows and import them, so if you have a test process where you have a test environment and you want people to be able to test it and then put it into live, it's a simple matter of exporting the workflow from your test environment and importing into the production one. So with that, I was going to just hand back to Richard. So let me just escape that.
Thanks, John. That's thanks to Gonzalo for their input there. That was excellent. And more importantly, thanks for you for attending. As a call to action, we'll certainly reach out to you to see if what you've seen today is of interest and if we can help further and explain further around automating your HR processes. There is a questions window, and we will have a look at that, and if there's any outstanding questions, then we will look to answer those, and if we don't get a chance to answer them now, we will certainly reply after the event anyway. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.